Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Glitch Kitchen. I'm your host, 5am, and today we're going to be talking about using Arpeggiator for sound design sessions. I'm just going to go into this kick folder, and I'm going to try out some kicks here. I'm going to use this 5am kick 8. I'm just going to double click that, pulls it in as a sample into an instance of Simpler, and where I can adjust some of the characteristics of this sound. But the first thing I'm going to do is grab an arpeggiator, and I'm going to set the track to record. And you'll notice that when I deactivated the arpeggiator here and I hit this F or any note on my keyboard, really, that sample is going to happen once, as it normally would. But if I turn on this arpeggiator, that's gonna it's gonna repeat the sample. So it's gonna repeat it based on the rate that I give it. In this case, it's a sync rate, which matches up with your BPM, so it actually goes by notes, like based on the time signature. And if you turn it to free, it does it based on milliseconds. So then you can get all the in between times. And we're gonna use it with the rate set to free. That way we can modulate it between very small increments and very large increments. Let's talk briefly about what the gate does. The gate will play either the full length of your envelope, an extended length of your envelope, or a shortened length of your envelope. Essentially, what it's doing is it's gating the MIDI note, so it's going to turn the note off. It's going to actually move to the release phase either sooner than it should or later than it should, based on whether it's less than 100% or above 100%. At 100%, it's going to play the envelope exactly as it is intended to. So if I decrease the gate, that'll create more space in between my notes, which can be helpful. So I'm going to go to the sample here, and I'm just going to listen to what I have right now. So as you can hear, that's a very short delay, which allows for repeats that can almost begin to sound tonal if you bring them to smaller increments. Short milliseconds, probably anything under 30 milliseconds, it's going to sound more like a note, which is really helpful and useful for bass layering, as well as for the types of sound design sessions that I'm going to demonstrate today. So now that we have this arpeggiator and a sample queued up, we're going to record in some MIDI. So now we have a little bit of MIDI to play with. I find that sometimes to be faster than creating a MIDI clip and writing in the note is to just record the note in, but maybe it's the same amount of time. But I try to take shortcuts. This arpeggiator is one of those shortcuts. So I'll show you how this can really help you essentially create textures and soundscapes and glitch sounds that you can chop up and use in your tracks. Right now I'm just automating the arpeggiator rate to create some articulations. It almost begins to sound like someone's speaking or some kind of a strange, like an animal noise. Another thing you can do is zoom in a little bit to get the grid smaller, and you can hit Command B to go to your pencil tool, and then you can draw in some random automation with your pencil tool. That can be fun to play with as well. So now I've got an automation that I really like here, and I'm going to go ahead and play it for you guys. All right, so you get the idea of how that works. I'll just show you how the gate can change the sound as well. The shorter gate lengths actually create this almost like a zipper or something with very, very short envelopes being repeated. So now let's go ahead and add something that I find really fun, which is an auto filter onto the end of this. And we're going to set that auto filter to be a band pass. We're going to adjust the resonance so it's relatively high while also turning down the volume of that sound to account for the potential clipping that could occur because the resonance is raised. So basically, I'm just compensating for potential clipping in this effect by actually kind of gain staging and turning the volume down before that effect so that it keeps the overall volume down. So I think right now some of the lower frequencies are being accented. I'm just going to raise this even higher, raise that frequency even higher. So what I'm doing is I've turned the LFO off, and I'm going to be moving the frequency. I'm going to automate some movement on the frequency of this auto filter. Just going to automate that, and you want to make sure that you don't have your MIDI overdub on in order to successfully record in this information. And you also don't want your track to be record armed, or it'll actually record over what you already recorded. So you just want to record automation. So you're going to unarm your track. I'm just cleaning that automation up, and then we're going to go ahead and listen to what we made. I think there are points where the resonance gets a little bit high, so I'm just going to dial back the resonance. I may actually go ahead and just slightly lower that resonance overall just by selecting everything and bringing it down slightly. And then I'm going to do a little bit of automation on the gate as well. I think at shorter gates, it actually sounds a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to give it more time with that short gate. And then sometimes it'll kind of come up for air and you'll be able to hear the tail of the sound because of the automation here. But mostly the short gate. All right, and let's hear that. So this is the sort of sound that after something like this, we might put another spatial effect, and I like to put things like ping pong delays at the end of these to sort of stretch them out and kind of spread them out in the stereo spectrum as well. Just playing around with the ping pong delay here. That's something that I might go ahead and automate. And when you automate a ping pong delay, you're creating effects that can be similar to a comb filter, especially at the small millisecond lengths. I placed a compressor, as you can see, at the end of this chain, just to prevent some of the clipping while also turning up some of the quieter parts of that sound that I created. I've got a relatively low threshold because the peaks, the areas of clipping happen kind of rarely, and the sound is still relatively quiet, but then I'm actually boosting it by 5 dB in the output to compensate. I have this compressor set to peak because that's going to help reduce the loudness of the loud hits, the hits that go over the threshold. It's going to reduce that faster. Peak is actually going to catch the initial peak of the sound. RMS does some math on the sound, which I find kind of creates a lag time before it is able to catch that transient of the sound. So now I'm going to mess around a little bit more with the free rate of this arpeggiator to show you some of the fun effects that can be created. That sounds almost like a synthesizer being pitched up. If you sort of set your major frequency to be 10 milliseconds, which is the lowest extremity of that knob, then what you can do is kind of create a root pitch. I've just switched up the automation a little bit on this arpeggiator to something that I prefer. And now I'm going to go ahead and freeze that track. And then I'm going to drag it onto an audio track. Deactivate the previous MIDI track. And let's listen to the audio. And this is it's really fun to freeze your MIDI out to audio because you can visualize the sounds you're creating. In this case, I can see that I've created some pretty sharp, kind of toothy sounds. So I really like these sounds because they sound like kind of like a creature talking. I'm going to go ahead and put some other kind of processing on this sound to excite different frequencies in the sound. So that's the result of a phaser. You can set it to space. If you hit Earth, you can set it to space, and that creates some really interesting kind of highly resonant phasing effects. It's nice to play with that and the stereo sample and hold that the phaser has. Now we're getting kind of almost a glitter kind of effect from it. But that's the effect that this phaser adds entirely. But it's nice to kind of just pull that in a little bit. Now I'm actually going to do some warping on this sound, and I'm going to set the warp mode to texture, and I'm going to automate the grain size. So first let's hear what texture does to this sound. It's playing back frames of the sound, small little sound bites from this audio file at a rate that I believe is either a percent of the, not a percent of the audio file. I'm not sure exactly what the grain size is. It's not milliseconds and it's not beats. So it's some arbitrary length of your length of a sample of your audio file, which you can automate. So that's what I'm going to do. And the flux is the variance in that length. I like to keep that 0 when I start out, maybe add in some of that. But first I'm going to go ahead and go to the grain size modulation over in envelopes, and I'm going to play around with the options for this. It might be something so simple that I can just duplicate it to cover more ground faster. So I don't have to automate this whole thing. I can just create a small automation, and then I can just duplicate it out. So now here's the result of that. So I'm definitely going to save this sound because I think this will be great for kind of an intro sound, and I can also steal pieces from it for other tracks and really anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Command J to consolidate that clip, and now we have in the consolidate folder of our current project, we actually have this this file here, which if I tap on the sample name in the sample box in the clip view, I can actually be pointed directly to that sample in the browser. So now I can go ahead and name this. I'm going to name it toothache. So I'm going to drag this into the atmospherics folder. Okay, so that's one way that sound could go, and I'm going to do another little bonus direction that it could take. I'm going to unfreeze that again and listen to what I had just to refresh my memory. Right. So I think that I can double that with another filter, which I can set an LFO rate on that one. It's kind of a different sound. And then we can maybe add some steps to the sampler. And I'm going to actually remove this ping pong delay. And I'm going to create more time in this free rate on the arpeggiator where the sound is actually more in the percussive range than in the note range. So I'm going to move some of these automations over towards the percussive rate range. So I'm going to try out some reverb on this. I'm going to use the Max for Live convolution reverb, which I believe is available if you have a copy of Live 9, and you can get Max for Live, and then you can download the convolution reverb for that. Right. So I'm going to use Convolution Reverb Pro for this demonstration. Already starting to really like that. I'm going to reduce the rate overall just by selecting all of that time and just dragging up on the automation. So it really has a very spacious kind of sound to it. I'm just tweaking the space that this sound seems to be coming through to make it a little bit more dialed toward a particular frequency range, just to clean up that reverb a little bit. And kind of adjusting the mix relative to the dry signal, using the gain knob and the dry wet. Another fun little effect that I can add in a small amount of is the redux effect. So I can just kind of just bring in a very small amount of that over some small increments and then turn it back down just to get a little bit of variation in the texture of that hit. So it sounds almost like it's like a more of a bio-digital sound than just a straight organic sound, which is what it kind of sounded like before. This is bringing some digital back into the sound, bringing a little bit of that high end back into it as well, which is really nice. We don't want to go too far into the crushed end too many times, but maybe a couple little crush zones could be cool. I like that. I think I'm going to go ahead and freeze that, and then I'm going to resample it. So I'm going to drag this clip down onto this audio track and deactivate this previous track like before. And then we're going to go to into the effects area and put a little EQ in there. And I'm going to boost some of the aspects of the sound that I like. Sometimes I EQ when I'm producing. Other times I'll actually EQ to kind of capture the best aspects of a sound before I save it. And that's to reduce the amount of work I have to do in the future when I want to use this sound. So I'm looking for particular aspects of the sound that might be nice. And I know there's a high end here that I'm not getting much of. So I'm going to use this OTT VST, which is free online by Xfer. And you can actually, you can take the depth down so it's used in a subtle way, and you can just subtly boost the high end of this sound. And I also boost the out gain to compensate. So I'll A-B that. Just boost the high end a little bit. And in my view, that's pretty good to go as far as having a nice sound to work with. So I'm going to freeze that. I noticed some clipping when I froze the track, so I'm going to reduce the out gain of the OTT plugin a little bit, as well as the in gain. I'm going to try freezing it again. That's a much nicer clip of audio there. It retains some of the dynamics. So this is the benefit of using this process, is that I can actually just undo a few steps. So I didn't like the reverb that I was using. I feel like the reverb is a little bit too loud, especially once I bring it into a multiband compressor like OTT. I'm going to reduce the decay of this reverb as well as the size. I want to be able to hear the sound decay more. So it goes back to 0 more before the next hit. And then I'm going to freeze that out. And on this new track, I have the resulting audio from that. Now I've got a sound that I really like. I'm going to freeze that one more time. And I'm going to go into the sample name, click on that just so I can find that file. Hit Command R and call it digidrips. And I'm going to click and drag that one into my tipulations folder, which has a bunch of kind of tippery sounds that I like. To me, that sounds kind of tippery, so I'm going to put that in there. Here's some other ones. You know, kind of messed around with sounds like this in the past. Yeah, so that's basically the tutorial. Thanks for taking the time to watch this, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. So, till next time, keep it glitchy.